Time is now 6:15 p.m. and we will call to order this special City Council meeting on Wednesday, June 25th, 2025. The first item on our agenda is a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion in that line?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. We'll go to a vote on that, and I will note that we are joined by Councilor Newbeezer online. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We have our budget. As we do at any public meeting, we, although a special meeting, have, I'm budget focused. We'll get there. So we have our agenda on where the budget is the one item tonight. Although it's a special meeting on the budget, we do still have public forum set for a time certain of 6 p.m. So we'll turn right to that now, open public forum at 6:16 p.m. Just as at regular council meetings, we will turn first to any Burlington residents here in City Hall. We have 2 Burlington residents who are signed up here in person. We will then turn to Burlington residents that are online. At the moment, we have 1 Burlington resident signed up online. We would then repeat that process for non-Burlington residents. At the moment, we only have 1 non-Burlington resident signed up, and they are online. If you're here in person, when I call your name, please come to the table. Make sure the microphone is on, the green light illuminated. If you're online, just wait for you to be unmuted, and there will be a timer for you. The timer, both online and in person, is 2 minutes. When providing comments, we ask that you please direct them to me as the chair and not any individual. It's important that City Hall remain a safe place for those who serve, those in attendance, and those watching our meetings. We certainly value and respect a diversity of opinions on public issues, but we ask that comments be free from any individualized attacks, hate, harassment, or reference to any individual's protected characteristics. We also ask that public comments avoid conduct which is unreasonably loud, disruptive, or discourteous. If I interrupt a speaker at any point in time, it will be to ask that they please act in accordance with these rules. If a speaker continues to act in violation of these rules, I reserve the right to end public forum at that point in time. So as mentioned, we have 2 Burlington residents signed up here in City Hall. The first will be Andrea Vietz. The second will be Brenda Torpy.
Good evening. I'm back from Heineberg Senior Center. I'm here this evening to say thank you for your response to my continued advocacy for the older residents of Burlington. I'm grateful for the establishment of a reserve fund for FY26 to help expand opportunities for older adults to be active, fully included members of our community. In order for that to happen, we must have a city employee charged with holding this responsibility, continued focus on addressing the needs of current participants at CORE, practical, results-focused work by city government and community partners to develop and expand services, and an assessment of both the existing needs and resources. In the coming months, I'll be coming back to the council and the mayor's office. You'll likely hear me speak about transportation challenges, food access, advocating with AgeWell for meals reimbursements, the need for foot care clinics, and above all, the need for creative, innovative ideas to create welcoming, inclusive, social gathering places and connections for older adults. The final city budget includes this language, quote, "In furtherance of the goal to provide meaningful programming to older adults, the administration will refer to the report and recommendations from the Council on Aging, as well as work with others serving older adults to identify programmatic gaps and opportunities to better support seniors," end quote. I challenge all of us to commit to this essential work. In the words of the Age Strong Burlington Plan, quote, "Improving the conditions of and opportunities for older adults in a community improves the lives of everyone." Thank you.
Well timed, Andrea. Thank you. Our next speaker is Brenda Torpy.
Thank you. Is that on?
You gotta make sure the green light on the microphone, it's,
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I'm here tonight just to share my appreciation and recognition of Brian Pine's service to the city and to the people of the city. You know, I'm here because for Brian, that was more than a job or a career. It came from his convictions and his care for the people of the community. And I have one story to illustrate the impact he could have. This is just one story. When I first met Brian, I was working as the city housing director. He was a volunteer. He was just giving of his time to go door to door to help pass these ordinances, one being the condo conversion ordinance that really helped us to save Northgate. Fast forward to when those funds expired 20 years later, I was helping the residents on a committee to be part of the restructure. He was the city housing director, and he was stewarding the city's considerable investment into Northgate and new funds to help it stay affordable. But he came to those meetings and sat with the residents and helped them structure NROC, which we know today is how the residents lead their own development. And he was part of them. He's one of them, not like a city official. Fast forward to today, we both serve on the Northgate Board as community representatives. It's a minority and position. But whenever anything's needed, you know, he's the first to put his hand up. And so I just wanted to, in that one story, that encapsulates how he's helped so many people and his work will be enduring to help thousands of lives in the future. Thanks.
thank you very much. As mentioned, we have one Burlington resident online for, excuse me. We have two non-Burlington residents signed up online, no Burlington residents. So we'll now turn to non-Burlington residents. The first will be Anthea Dexter-Cooper, and the second will be Karen Sita. Anthea, I'm just going to share my screen here. And you'll be able to see a timer. And once you see that, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
I believe I've been unmuted. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. I will get going. So hello, I'm Anthea Dexter-Cooper, the Executive Director of Run Vermont, which is the nonprofit organization that produces the M&T Bank Vermont City Marathon and Relay each year. I presented to you in early May about the M&T Bank Vermont City Marathon and Relay, including on demographics of registrants and a back of the envelope economic impact estimate with regards to revenue that is brought to Burlington and the surrounding area through things like participant and spectator expenditures on lodging, meals, and registration fees. I'm providing public comment today for 3 reasons. The first is to express appreciation in general for all of the work that the city, including the mayor, city council, and staff, have put into the city's budget over the last few months, and an immense appreciation for the funding that will be going to the M&T Bank Vermont City Marathon and Relay if the budget as presented is adopted. The second is to provide an update on demographics from the 2025 running of the M&T Bank Vermont City Marathon and Relay. I am thrilled to report that we saw growth across all events over the course of the weekend. Between 2024 to 2025, the growth in marathon registrants and 3 to 5 person teams was 9%. It was 18% for 2-person teams, and it was 19% for the youth races. This continues a trend of growth from 2023, and the overall growth in marathon and relay team registrations from 2023 to 2025 was 13%, and it was almost 60% for the youth races. Adding to the excitement around these registration trends was that the 18 to 29 age band, which for the second year in a row is the most represented age band within the marathon registrants. Some say that this is a third running boom, and I hope that is the case, both for purposes of Run Vermont's mission to promote running as a lifelong activity and for the continued success of the M&T Bank Vermont City Marathon and Relay. And my final point is that in going through the responses to the survey that we sent to all registrants, 2 trends are emerging. 1, you can never have too many signs or bathrooms, and that Burlington, its neighborhoods, its residents, its musicians, its businesses came out to shine on Marathon Sunday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last public forum speaker signed up is Karen Sita. If Karen could please be promoted. Karen, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I took a hot girl walk, so I'm exhausted. But, I'm just here to talk about the budget because she's the woman talking about the budget. My main concern is a couple of things. Obviously, the employees that have lost their job during a chronic time of sadness. So I just want to tell all the dedicated city employees who have lost their jobs, who felt humiliated, who felt extremely disrespected. Um, Let your heart not be weary. I see joy coming. And my concern is regarding these raises, especially what the media has told us regarding the wife. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't have necessarily the time to deep dive into all of the city's official budget, but I will get there. I'm just doing discovery right now in a way that this legal community has never seen before. So that takes a lot of my time, but I'm still very much paying attention. So I just want to know if she's getting 16,000, her wife, what is the way that the city can tell that yes, every penny was worth it? Because if this was a husband situation, we would all kind of be in uproar.
Point of order.
Corinne, yeah, I'm going to ask that you please not personalize the issue. It is.
Okay. Well, this is what the media has told us, people who really can't be in it, but will have to be in it. So I'm just letting the city know that we are concerned and we just want to know all the public ways that these funds are being used. Again, I haven't deep dived yet. When I deep dive, I'm a deep dive. And then you can really have some problems there. But right now, I'm just telling you what is being reported is public city committed individuals who love our city are being humiliated and losing money and for no reason. So budget is important, but so is love.
That is the last speaker we had signed up for public forum, so we will go ahead and close public forum now at 6:27 p.m. We have two items in our deliberative agenda, as mentioned, both related to the FY26 budget. The first is item 3.1, a resolution, the annual appropriation and budget for fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025, and ending June 30th, 2026. This comes to the council with the unanimous support of the Board of Finance, and Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer Shad would be happy to turn the floor to you to introduce the item.
Thank you very much. The CEO, Shad, and I will be tag teaming this as we go through a high-level overview of the budget. So posted on Civic Clerk is both the resolution as well as a memo which details a lot of the process, the challenges that we faced here as we built fiscal year 26 budget for the city of Burlington. And so I'm pleased to be able to present to you another balanced budget, but after a much harder year of budgeting. This budget reflects an unwavering commitment to affordability for residents here in the city of Burlington, as well as good fiscal stewardship of city resources that are allocated to us to put into place for members of the public. It also contains very critical investments in key priority areas for my administration, largely community safety and housing. This is a budget, though, that was built after a very hard budget cycle last year where we had a $14.2 million budget gap, and this year it was at $9.8 million. I've talked a lot about what has led to our structural challenges. It has several different items that go into this. This is a regular unfortunate occurrence in how the city of Burlington's budget pans out each year. However, this year, we dove deeply into the budget to start to make some serious changes to address this chronic gap. This is not a gap that future city councilors or future mayors should have to solve. This is about putting the city on the right path towards right-sizing what we can afford and putting ourselves into a more sustainable path. I want to remind people that part of what has led to this challenging structural gap includes how the workforce has grown over the last 9 years in the city. We've added 98 full-time positions. Of those 98 positions, 37 are new positions that were created with use of one-time funds with no sustainable long-term funding solution identified after those one-time funds ended. Another ongoing challenge every single year, as with many employers, is the incredibly crushing increased cost of health insurance. This year alone, it is expected to increase the premium cost for the city by 11%. These double-digit increases are not sustainable, and while we want to be a strong employer and provide high-quality health care, you'll see later on in the memo that I posted, we really need this to be handled on a state and federal level to solve this absurd healthcare crisis that is crushing every employer. We have to come up with better policy solutions. We've also invested a lot in the growing of salaries of all city employees with generous settlements with our police union, our firefighters union, and AFSCME, which represents the vast majority of other unionized city employees, at increases ranging between 15 to 20%. This also includes a 15% increase for non-union employees. While this is a very important investment in our city employees for all the hard work they do on behalf of the city, this totals up a big obligation for the city to continue to fund year after year. We also, of course, all have seen the increase of the cost of inflation, the growth of programs and services that has been asked for the city, as well as the combination only on the other side of the ledger, only being a modest growth to our grand list. This has set up this unsustainable structure for the city. I want to also note that this budget took a lot of additional extra work because we worked to not only zero out any sort of growth compared to last fiscal year so that the budget itself was held at a 0% increase when we started designing it, but we went further to reduce the size of that total budget, and we were able to deliver you a budget that decreases or reduced by more than 1% when you compare the total to fiscal year 25. That is pretty rare out there in government. Most of the time, government continues to grow. You try to fund that with more taxes, but it is very rare when we reduce the actual bottom line. And that is very important and noteworthy because it reflects not only the more disciplined budgeting practices that we have put into place, but as I said earlier, a real commitment to starting to solve and narrow the structural budget gap so we put the city on a better course in years to come. We have not solved this completely. It is impossible to do that in 1 or even 2 fiscal years, and so there's more work to do headed into the future. I also just want to thank the number of city employees who were involved in this process, both building the budget from department heads to division heads to the entire clerk treasurer's office. In particular, my CAO, Catherine Schad, has done an immense amount of work to steward this going forward. This was no small, easy task in a normal year, whatever a normal year is like, but I asked a lot of the city staff this year to be able to deliver something that went a bit further and be a bit deeper in order to do these important budget changes. I also want to acknowledge in part of these very hard decisions, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, included significant impacts on city employees, including the 25 positions that we had to reduce in order to, again, narrow the structural budget gap for the city. On a slightly positive side, there is a number of employees, I think the number is around 4 or 5 of the laid-off employees who have been reemployed by the city due to vacant positions they've been able to transition into or be bumped into. So the impact has been lessened by that ability to bring people back in, and our city continues to engage those folks for the next 2 years to be able to, again, bring people back in when there's another opportunity available in the city. Just an important update after that important and hard transition. The process that we used this year to build this budget, we did several different pieces, and it was not made easier with who became president of the United States. The Trump administration has made all municipal government's job that much harder by having the negative impact of freezing federal monies. So many municipalities rely heavily on federal funding, but also imposing tariffs and advancing other harmful policies that have negatively impacted our local and regional economy. We also worked hard to do big things that we haven't done in the city in a while, at least, around merging departments and implementing the personnel cuts I mentioned before in order to bring this budget under control. And that was done without any standard procedures in place prior to becoming mayor to inform how do we merge departments, how do you reduce force in terms of policies. So some of this was uncharted waters, which made this work very difficult. Also, about 2 weeks ago, we discovered a $1.8 million miscalculation and solved it, all before we delivered you this final budget. And that was all significant and important work, but led to where we are here today. We also brought in some new tools that I want to make sure the public is aware of, because some of it is a public-facing piece. We created a city budget dashboard, which folks can interact with to understand how we spend money and where our largest departments are in terms of being funded from the general fund. We've now fully implemented a budgeting monitoring practice at Board of Finance, where we look monthly at the budget to actual reports to see how money is coming in and flowing to the city or not. We started the budgeting process itself much earlier. After we held a budget summit last August, we realized we have to move the calendar year earlier in terms of our development to allow more time to go deeper into our budgets, but also to plan ahead for town meeting day, which we did diligently this year because we knew we needed to advance 3 critical infrastructure bonds for where we're headed in terms of housing and climate needs in our city and community safety. In order to make that affordable for residents, we wanted to make sure that we would not have to ask for a general rate tax increase at the same time. We were successful in doing that because of the earlier planning that we put in earlier in the calendar year. And I am proud that this budget did not include a significant general rate tax increase for residents. That was no easy task. The Tax Fairness Working Group, for which we have 2 counselors serving on, continues to work and will deliver recommendations this summer. That's another commitment from me around affordability and making sure we continue to develop policies that keep income in mind and continue to build out ways we can have that reflected in our tax policy. And it also dovetails with the innovative work by Burlington Electric Department and our Water Department on expanding existing affordability programs they have for water and electric use in the city for residents. We also launched first-time tools, which we will continue to use in the next coming years, called Modern Gov Initiative, which looks on the effectiveness of city government, and through that, mergers and restructuring. We also used a first-ever service inventory tool, which looked at every single city service and program. And we conducted that this spring to go deep into what is required by charter, ordinance, or city council resolutions, so we knew really what core services are for the city and what is secondary. That helped us make sure we were right-sizing government in an informed way based on what is really required of us and be realistic about what we cannot sustain further. There is updates attached to the memo, of course, that mention more about Modern Gov if people are interested. I just want to emphasize that we have more work to do because we have not fully solved the structural budget gaps for the city. And so more will be coming to you in fiscal year 26 and 27 as we continue to put the city on a sustainable path. Finally, before I pass it over to the CAO for a few more comments, I just want to note that I've only had 2 budget cycles as the role of mayor, but this particular cycle involved a lot of back and forth with city council, literally up to just the other day, and just literally like a day or 2 ago. I really appreciated the rigorous and detailed back and forth. This shows me that we all care deeply about this city. It also meant that we were making modifications to this budget and adding things to this budget that required a lot of additional work by staff in order to deliver you the kinds of documentations we need. But through all that hard work, I do hope that people will see this budget ideally as a budget that is fair, a fair compromise between city council and my administration that can deliver the core services in an affordable way to the city's residents. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to the CAO to just talk a little bit about our budget pressure points.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think you have touched on several of these, so I don't think we'll need to take too long. We have spoken about the increase of personnel costs over the past several years and what that does. We have spoken that somewhere, depending on the department, between 80 and 90% of our general fund budget is related to personnel. And so adding those staff really provided substantial pressure to this budget. And that is really at odds with the increasing concerns that we have heard from residents about the city becoming unaffordable. And that was something that all of us here at this table certainly struggled with as we were seeking to honor the commitments that we made to our unions and our employees, to honor the COLA increases, to make sure that we are providing adequate health care and honoring benefits such as paid family leave and others that make the city a good place to work. Also, in the past few years, as we and other cities have been kind of weaning ourselves off of one-time federal funding, we've also found ourselves without some of the previous strategies that we have used to close these budget gaps. In addition to ARPA funding, we had more unassigned and assigned fund balance in past years that we were wanting to use in the budget process. And now that our unassigned fund balance is where it is, we've decided not to make that choice. And so there are fewer options available to us. And so that's why we really had to make the strategic choices to reduce employees and also to reduce programs and services. So before I talk a little bit about property taxes, I'll turn it back to the mayor so she can talk in a little bit more detail about the solutions that we chose for closing this gap.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, this year's budget gap.
Mayor, I apologize for interrupting you. I want to flag for Town Meeting TV. I've received a note that we may not be live on YouTube right now. We are live on Zoom, but I'm not sure if the YouTube feed is live. Are we good now? It is? Okay. I'm receiving a note, and I went on YouTube myself, and it doesn't appear to be live right now. In any event, if we could just double check it, I just wanted to flag that for you,
Nope,
Mayor.
thank
I was
you.
receiving
Yeah.
a couple notes about that.
That shows how engaged people are.
Yes.
Like riveting TV. So I'm going to keep going.
So I'm very sorry to interrupt.
That's
Just-
okay.
yeah.
I'm sure my parents are trying to watch at home too. so-
Exactly.
yeah.
It was
They
them,
don't live
actually.
in
who-
Burlington, for the record, but they know more about Burlington than the average person. Okay, so I was just about to say that in terms of closing this year's gap, again, I said earlier that the gap for fiscal year 26 was $9.8 million in terms of, and again, a gap is where we start off in the beginning of the year with knowing that we don't have enough revenue unless we significantly change something or change something on the other side of the ledger, that we will have a gap in terms of filling. And so a deficit is on the other end of the fiscal year where you have overspent, and then you don't have enough resources, and that is a much worse position to be in. So we have $9.8 million gap this year, and we've closed that. There's on page 5 of the memo we posted, it includes a list of how we went about doing that. We did have to use a modest increase to municipal taxes, which amounts to about 3 different splinter tax. We have over a dozen splinter tax overall in the Burlington tax system, but we used the final penny that was authorized by voters in March of 2024 on the public safety tax. That's a dedicated tax that only goes to police and fire services. We also put a little bit more on parks and highway taxes. Those are taxes per charter that the city council, with mayor approval, can support to increase revenue. But we kept that very modest on purpose because, again, affordability was critically important. Those two pieces combined on a house that's valued at $500,000 will come in at about $115 for the entire year in terms of an increase over last year. This is after the last several years of much higher increases each year on a house. Now, that is not accounting for income sensitivity, and it certainly doesn't account, it also does not account for the education side of a property tax bill. And so as folks know, about 2/3 of your bill goes to the education fund for the state. That is actually estimated to be that is estimated to be a decrease this year based on the hard work of the Burlington School District. And for that same imaginary house or so of $500,000, that's expected to be a $300 plus decrease on someone's property tax bill. So these combinations, it's really important to hear. Most people in the city of Burlington will see an overall decrease in their property tax bill. A decrease between what the school district was able to do and what we were able to do on the municipal side. I'm very proud of that fact. And for folks who are able to access the income sensitized portion of the education property tax bill, they should probably see even more savings because the 2/3 of that bill has a different calculation based on income. We also had modest growth on our grand list. We had a number of fees and other pieces folks can read in here related to pilots and whatnot in terms of assumptions around growth on revenue. You'll see here again, high level of the efficiencies and savings we were able to get from the Modern Gov initiative and the service inventory. When we realized that there was a $1.8 million error that we caught before we delivered you this budget, we went deeper and paused certain hiring in order to hire later in the fiscal year for about a limited amount of savings. I also decided at that point, decided not to take a COLA myself for the entire next year of fiscal year 26. That was an important leadership moment to make sure that we were collectively, I included, was collectively holding the burden of these hard choices for this year. And I also asked my department heads to join me for 6 months to not accept a COLA, so delaying their COLA until 6 months into the new fiscal year. We also had additional savings, you'll see at the end of that table, if you're following along, of additional tweaks in order to, again, account for a $1.8 million additional amount of savings we needed to find to close the gap. I also just want to note that this really is the end of ARPA. We literally had pennies at this point that we were, as the CAO likes to talk about, an imaginary couch. We found them under the couch at this point, and we've used all and expended all those funds, but it was a very, very small amount of money that was available left to the city. And just want to make sure people know this will be the last time you'll likely hear of us having any ARPA funds, because they are really, truly done. And with that, I'm going to hand it over back to the CIO.
Thank you. And I realized as I'm starting to talk about the tax rate that your eyes were probably going to glaze over. So I am bringing up the visual here, which hopefully everyone will be able to see. And there we go. It's a little small. I'm going to make it a little larger. Because when we talk about the municipal property tax rate, some of you have heard me say before, it is made up of 14 different rates. And you can see them here, and I won't talk about every single one. But as the mayor noted, and the big picture down here at the bottom, our old rate was about 83 cents. And our new rate is about 85 cents. So that's about a 2-cent increase. And how did we get there? You can see that there's a few changes in the format. You can see last year we had one combined police and fire tax. And this year, on the advice of the city attorney, we have separated them in these two lines here, 9 and 10. We still refer to them and think of them as the public safety tax. And we did add that penny here. If you want to do that math over here, it equals 10.85 cents. You'll just see that it's broken out a little bit differently with police and fire. The Bike Path Maintenance Fund is one of 3 different splinter taxes that, after some careful review by our city attorney, we found that was a rate that needed to come down this year. If that is something that the city council is interested in raising back to the previous rate, that is something that would need to go to the voters. So we all value the bike path, but in order to be compliant, we have reduced that rate just a little bit. You can also see the same effect on street capital, which has come down a little bit. And our third one, which is the open space tax as well. There are, in addition to police and fire, a couple that have gone up as well. The parks tax, which is distinct from pennies for parks. The pennies project specifically goes to capital projects, larger capital projects, and the parks tax can fund anything pretty much that is related to the expenses incurred in the Parks, Recs, and Waterfront Department. Also, the highway tax, which is in many ways similar to street capital. And that is something that Parks and Highway are unique in that City Council has the authority to raise them without going to the voters. There are floors set, but there is not a ceiling as long as it is reasonable and we are using this money for its intended purpose per the charter. And then many of these rates you'll see have stayed exactly the same, such as library and housing trust. And then we get down here to the bottom, there's 2 taxes here. One is for Green Mountain Transit, and that has gone up a little bit. They've been here, so I won't talk about it, talking to us about their needs, and we are funding those needs. We have a county tax. People ask what that is for. It is for the court across the street. And then the last two here are rather significant. They are retirement and debt service, and we are required by charter to fund them. And you'll notice that retirement is going up, but just a little bit this year. You know, that depends on many factors, how many people we have, former employees that are retired, how well our fund is doing, among other things. And then debt service, this is all the bonds that have been previously approved by the voters and are now in repayment status. And you can see that is going down just a little bit as well. Although I could talk about taxes all day, I will stop. And talk a little bit beyond property taxes. We also, I will talk a little bit about some assumptions we made on gross receipts. Last year, we raised the non-lodging portion of gross receipts. So that is admissions, alcohol, amusements, and meals, from 2% as the local portion to 2.5%. And at this point, that has been extended until through August, and we are proposing that that ends up going through September 1st, 2026, to allow the council and administration time to build a budget for FY27 and really decide should that be something that remains in place permanently, or how do we want to handle that. I will note that the hotel, otherwise known as the rooms rate, was raised from 2% to 4% last year. And that's a way to make sure that visitors to Burlington are also paying their fair share of taxes and that it does not all fall on property owners. And that 4% continues in perpetuity. Local option tax is the 1% sales tax you pay if you do not pay gross receipts. And one of the things that came out of Montpelier this year is that the yield before, as this is collected by the state, was that the state gave us 75%, no, yes. The state was 75 and we were 25%, and now we will be getting more of that. It will go 70%, 30%. And so we were able to increase our assumptions by an additional $150,000. And so that is also meaningful as we're looking for ways to diversify our revenue sources away from property taxes and towards more consumption taxes. There are some other non-tax revenues such as pilots, development permits, and increases to things such as our Uber and Lyft fees that are also programmed into this budget. The mayor spoke a little bit about program and staff reductions, so I won't speak too much about that, except to say that we knew that we needed to make some of these staff reductions because we had paid for so much growth with one-time funds. There has been some discussion about why we did not cut the same positions that were added with one-time funds. And I just want to stress that in many ways that would have been the easy thing to do, to just look at what positions were added over the past few years and do a sort of last in, first out approach. But when you look at the positions that were added with one-time or recent funding, many of those positions are positions we've really come to rely on in these past few years. Our community support liaisons, our community safety officers, and the entire REIB. And so those were very critical, and those are not positions by and large that we wanted to cut, and that's why we took a much more surgical approach to the way that we went about determining which of those employees' jobs would be affected and which of those services that we might be able to reduce. So speaking of that, there is a list in the mayor's memo of the services that we were really forced to reduce. As you know, we have ended the core program and the lease at the One Community Center, but we have set aside $50,000 for programming for seniors, as well as reinstated the adult rec specialist position. There has been a lot of, reducing middle management positions, centralizing services such as financial services and IT services. We have stopped providing REIB empowerment grants and the grants from BCA that were provided with general funds. We've also wound down the Early Learning Initiative and scholarships for third shift families, as that is going to be provided by the state. All of that said, this is not an austerity budget. The mayor has been very clear about what her priorities are, and this budget does include strategic investments in community health and safety and housing. We've maintained money for public health work. We're continuing to fund the special assistant to end homelessness position that was funded with one-time money and now is permanently funded. We are continuing to use our opioid money for what was first the community response team out of the fire department and is now going to be known as our community paramedicine program. We're continuing to make good progress on the overdose prevention center, and we are continuing to work with our community safety system. Our senior advisor is making good progress. We've just had the situation table training happening over the past few days. We have created new positions for housing. We've got funding for additional sworn officers, more money for Howard Street outreach, and we have continued to push for affordability programs for both BED and water. I think that's about it, and we are just about to move forward to next steps, so I'll turn it over to you, Mayor, to finish up.
Thank you very much. And I just want to, while I have the mic and before I fully wrap up, I just want to note I caught a typo on page 6. Just and for those who are really watching and follow local option sales tax, we just had it inverted. The local municipalities per state law collect now 70% of the revenues, and the state takes 75 now is the current law as it was signed by the governor, and that goes 25 goes to the state. We just had it inverted in the memo. That's a pop quiz for later if you're really following on to that level of detail. Okay, so to wrap up, I just want to say, last year in my memo to the council on the budget, I made a series of promises and commitments about what we would work on in the upcoming year to inform and build upon for fiscal year 26 and beyond. I'm not going to go through them all at this hour because I wanted to now yield the floor over, but I want to bring people's attention to that last part of the memo. We were able to do a lot of advancement on things that we have queued up at this time last year. And I'm proud of the work that our entire city team has done to initiate a lot of changes to our budgeting practices to move us into a more sustainable way. And I just want to close with saying that this budget really is truly one that is moving the city on a more affordable track, a more sustainable track. And we will continue to be deeply committed to improving and strengthening our budgeting practices because that benefits everyone here in the city of Burlington. And with that, I will yield it back to you, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, CIO Schad, and everyone else who was involved in the big lift to get us to this evening. I will begin by first inviting a motion on the recommended action on Civic Clerk, which is to waive the reading and adopt the resolution.
Well, I would move to waive the reading and adopt the first resolution on the agenda.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Councilor Bergman, do you want the floor back now, or I would be happy to open the floor generally to councilors? Okay, great. Thank you for that motion. Are there any councilors that have questions or would otherwise like to be recognized on this item? Don't all jump at once. Well, we could go to a vote, or, okay. Councilor Newbeezer, I will note that you are sideways on the screen here.
Am I?
And,
I don't know what that's about. Let's
It's
see.
okay. You can either keep the video on sideways or, there we are. Now you're right side up.
All right, I'll take that. All right, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you for bearing with me. I appreciate the time and just want to say thank you to the mayor and city staff for your work on this budget. I'm sitting outside a concert in Shelburne in the parking lot that we pre-planned, so didn't want to cancel, but also wanted to make sure I was here today because this is important work. We'll start with just general comments on the budget. The reality today in our city, as we know, is that the vast majority of our people cannot afford to live in our city. 60% of our city rents, and for those who rent, 31% pay over half of their income on rent. The median sale price of a home in our city is over $500,000. Wages have not kept up with the increases to the price of everyday essentials like food and transportation and energy. That is why I think it is so important that we as a city put forward a budget that prioritizes affordability and does so in a transparent way. And that is exactly what I am grateful to say and excited to say that this budget does. This will be the first time in many years that a residential property taxpayer in our city will see a decrease to our property tax bill. That is incredibly important because until we move away from our current regressive municipal property tax, which is work that we are engaged in, we need to be mindful that first, many in our community are retired and on a fixed income, so they cannot afford the endless tax hikes year over year over year. They need stability to retire with dignity. We also need to recognize that we want young families, as many of us, I'm sure, would agree, to live in our city, and not just young families from out of state who moved here a few years ago with highly paid remote jobs, but everyone, regardless of how much money you may be making. And finally, it's important because we cannot allow rents to continue to skyrocket. And while I rented for many years in our city, I never thought about property tax rates and how they impacted me. The reality is that our property taxes, because we don't have those tools to ask those at the top to pay more, directly impact renters. The reality is that if we increase municipal property taxes, and as we have over years and years and years now, landlords are passing those costs directly on to renters. And we do not have rental stabilization policies in place to prevent that from happening currently. The voters of Burlington, and I certainly heard this loud and clear when I was knocking on doors, told us to work to decrease the property tax burden overall and pursue tax fairness reforms so that those with the most income and wealth pay more and those who can least afford it in our city get a break. And that is exactly what I know myself and the Progressive Caucus and the administration is working hard to do. This budget also stretches every dollar the city has and works to improve how city bureaucracy functions. And there's no doubt that we've been forced to make very hard choices. Even so, as we've heard, we are making critical investments in infrastructure, housing, affordability, and community safety. And I'll have to note for many, unlike austerity, we are refocusing our capacity to meet the challenges of today. We are making smart investments so that we can tackle the housing crisis. I appreciate also and want to note and say thank you again, as I did last meeting, that the mayor is asking department heads to eliminate their 3% COLA raise for 6 months, and that the mayor herself will eliminate her COLA raise this year entirely. I think that is incredibly important in any year that we face budget challenges and that we experience rifts in the city. The financial burden must be shared, and that means that leadership in any organization should refrain from taking any form of a raise. For me, the pieces around affordability, the pieces around transparency, the leadership that our city department heads and mayors are showing in helping balance this budget tells me that we have a progressive administration running the city. I've worked for many, many years to make that a reality, and I'm very glad that we have made so much progress in shifting how we operate this city in such a short period of time. There's no doubt that we have a lot of work ahead, and I look forward to working collaboratively with all my colleagues and the administration to get that work done. We must continue to work to pass tax fairness reform, and we must put forward housing policies that uplift working and middle-class families, seniors, and the majority of the city, 60% of our city, who rent. So with that, I will yield the floor back, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Nubizer. I next have Councilor Schachter in the queue.
Thanks, President Travers. First, I just want to truly thank everyone, Mayor, your administration, my council colleagues, everyone who's worked so hard, our department heads, our city staff, and I'm sure a lot of input from community members as well to get us to today's budget. And I too share a lot of gratitude and appreciation that we're looking at an overall tax decrease for the vast majority of Burlington residents, property tax decrease between our city budget coupled with the school budget. One thing I did just want to name is that I know that the city budget is based, at least in part, on some assumptions around gross receipts that I know are still in process. For example, this budget memo talks about the 2.5% gross receipts tax extending through September 1st, 2026, and this is something that we'll be taking up as a council in July, because it's currently scheduled to sunset later this summer. And I just wanted to flag that at last week's CD&R committee meeting, we also discussed that it appears that there's a slight discrepancy potentially with gross receipts when it comes to the short-term rental tax and the funding going into the Housing Trust Fund. I believe that right now we have a historical appropriation of 7% rather than 9%, which I believe is what the short-term rental ordinance states. So I think this is something that I just ask that we all consider taking up when we revisit gross receipts in July, around that 2.5% gross receipts tax. I think these both require further attention. I'm glad to be supporting the budget this evening. I just want to make sure that these issues do get addressed, particularly given I think all of our shared commitment to affordable housing in this community. So I'm committed to making any budget adjustments necessary to make sure that where we ultimately land with gross receipts reflects our city ordinances. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Schachter. I do not have any other councilors at the moment. Councilor Carpenter?
Thank you. Just to clarify, this is on the proposal for the budget as a whole. Is this the appropriate time to talk about specific things in the budget?
Yes,
Okay.
This would be the appropriate time
Okay.
to discuss specific budget items.
Thank you. And I don't want to repeat what others, I certainly don't want to repeat what my colleague Andrea Vietz said, but I do want to thank the mayor and chief of staff for listening to the needs of the seniors. And I think the language in the budget adjustment or the budget proposal really reflects some goals that will take a real stretch for us. And I'm very happy that we got to a place with a position and some reserve funds so we can start talking about it. This is a conversation we probably should have had last year at least, and certainly many months ago. So I both look forward to the opportunity. You know, it had been a little frustrating we hadn't had the conversation, but I think that will be an important step forward, and I do thank the mayor for listening to that. Same thing on senior advisor and housing. I really do feel CEDO is the appropriate place, and I think we need to work as fast as we can to get that position filled. You know, we've talked a lot about tax fairness for our older residents, and just that alone is something we need to look at. You know, are there reverse equity programs for paying taxes? Is that something that we could look at? Is the use of our housing trust fund the best use for that small pot we've got? Should we look at that again? So I'm going to both view these as wanting more future resource, but an opportunity for us to talk those things out. And I will say the same thing with regional programming. That's a toughie. I really do look forward to an opportunity to sort of dig into that. We all have our favorite programs. I know Councilor Nubizer wants to propose another way of cutting that pie. I encourage us not to do that at this meeting. We all have our favorite charities, and they're all fabulous charities. We have to say what's the most important way to use the city money to accomplish those goals. And we need to take next year to look at that and parse out how that small fund best uses our funds. I think we've, after lots of discussion, have come to a fair place. And like I said, we all have our favorite charities. I might have liked more money in senior services, maybe JUMP, other things. But we got to a place and we had to make those decisions probably faster than we wanted. So I'm satisfied for this year and certainly support the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Singh. We'll go Councillor Singh and then Councillor Bergman.
Thank you, President Travers. Thank you to everyone at this table. Thank the administration and all the city staff that's helped us get through this budgeting process. Catherine, Chad especially, and other department heads who have fielded our questions throughout this. I also really want to extend a thanks to the school district who's worked so hard to use the resources from the state and help educate our children while bringing savings to the city. I really urge the inkling to pat ourselves on the back. It's really important to recognize there are people behind these positions that were lost, and there are families. There are people who relied on the services and programs that these people provided and offered for many years, and they were kind while administering those programs, and they had such institutional knowledge. And I understand this is part of our collective jobs, and I understand that these are difficult times. This city carries an outsized weight of our region and state for the crises that sit on our doorstep in this city, from housing to homelessness, substance abuse, and affordability. This requires accountability, transparency, and collaboration in all levels of the city, to our nonprofits, to our state leaders, to our business community, so we can tackle what is before us and not have new ideas live in a black box. It is important that we recognize that each year the task is to split up this pie into many pieces. And each year that pie cutting gets more and more difficult. Our city has some of the highest taxes and the highest costs in sales and gross receipts tax. Some call consumption taxes. But I do not want to look to a future where these are the only avenues for revenue growth, and I don't want to go down that path. What this city and state has not recognized and embraced enough is growing the pie so that each piece can be larger and can help tackle the problems we face. Growth in housing, opportunity, jobs, and income. We need to unlock these new ideas and things like the items in the neighborhood code and other resources so that everyone in this city can benefit. We need this city to be welcoming people to start their dreams, whether it be a family, a business, employment, education, or recreation. It is moving towards a growth mindset where we can help ease the burden so we have the resources to tackle what's before us. I believe that, and I believe this city has done that before, and I know we can do it again. Thank you. And I will support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Singh. We'll go to Councillor Bergman and then Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. So it's pretty clear to me the amount of collaboration that it's taken to get to this point. And I want to thank the mayor for engaging in that process. I know that from our standpoint, we were more involved in this, particularly at the end game when we were having these negotiations than we ever had. I don't feel as shut out as I did in prior administrations, and I truly appreciate the collaboration across the aisle and with the administration. So thank you on that. It's very clear to me that we need to make systemic changes in our budgeting, which is really what we do, and that has been many years coming. Fully unfair to think that this is just in the last year. Everything that we've talked about, including the senior housing stuff, has been at issue for a long time. I am 72 plus years old. This is not an issue that has happened in terms of, the need for senior services in the last year. And the gap, the $9 million gap, that it was an indication of this need. And it's just very, very clear that there are serious needs that we have to pay for and work that we've got to do to give us the city that we not only deserve, but brings out the best in all of us. And one of the needs is affordability. We've heard that, and I'm very glad that the mayor's budget will lead to lower taxes and implement new measures on affordability, like in the water bills. There are just so many programs and services that we need, as well as all the infrastructure and capital and maintenance projects that we need, especially in housing and community in safety. And we just have to recognize that as a community and as a council. And so doing it on the cheap or trying to just cut our way into affordability is a failed course. So we have to fund the city. We need to fund these things to have the city that we need. This budget does that, but it also looks to the future. And that's what's actually most exciting to me about this. We codify many of these things in this budget resolution. And the work on the senior programs is one area, and the work on tax fairness is another one. It's work that we all are going to have to be doing over the next year and in the years to come, because this is not a next year task. This is a many-year task that includes next year. We have been doing the work of trying to grow the city for a long time. There is a growing income and wealth gap in this country, and I don't think that we can address this without fundamentally addressing the inequities and inequalities that we've got in this country and that are reflected in the city. So I really look forward to the conversation that we'll have on that, and I will be supporting this budget and not trying, despite my colleague, maybe a colleague who will try to put in an amendment, not try to upset the apple cart at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bergman. Councilor Barlow?
Thank you, President Travers. I too will be supporting the budget tonight, and I want to echo my thanks as well to the administration and to the staff for their hard work on developing this very difficult budget. And I also want to acknowledge the good faith negotiations over the last couple of weeks that went on to arrive at the budget we're voting on tonight. There are still some disappointments for me in this budget, but on balance, I'm satisfied where we landed, and particularly satisfied that we were able to incorporate additional spending that will better support our downtown economy. We were able to balance the budget with only a modest municipal tax increase, and thanks to the savings realized in the education taxes this year, we were fortunate that most property tax bills will be decreasing. I agree with the comments Councilor Travers made at Board of Finance this evening, and remain concerned about how losing certain key personnel through the RIF process may impact our housing mission at CEDO and the recreation mission at BPRW. And I wish we could have been able to be more successful negotiating the retention of those employees and the experience and institutional knowledge we may have lost in both of those departments. I'm also disappointed that we continue to have a dependence in FY26 on the half-cent levy on non-rooms and meals, or non-rooms gross receipts tax that we had intended to let expire at the end of 2025, FY25. But I am glad that we can use the additional significant, use a significant amount of that revenue in expanding supports for the downtown. We have money budgeted for BCA event programming with a specific focus on small, more frequent events in the downtown. We have money budgeted for free parking promotions at the Marketplace Garage, and we'll be looking into direct aid for businesses impacted by construction. These budget additions, when combined with other recent action, like the free parking promotion at Main and Winooski lot and the two-way nights and weekends traffic on Main Street, should help our downtown businesses. And if I may zoom out for a moment, one area that I am extremely concerned about is the amount of general fund that is used to respond to the homelessness, substance misuse, and mental health crises that continue to challenge our city. Burlington has played an outsized role in addressing this statewide problem, and we are reaching our limit on the amount of resource that we can affordably contribute as a community. This year, the cost of Burlington is estimated to be approximately $8 million, which is almost as big as the budget gap we had to solve with cuts to personnel, programs, and services. Our contribution to addressing this statewide problem seems to be an order of magnitude larger than any of our Chittenden County neighbors. In the coming year, we must make progress on regionalizing the response to these crises with state dollars and by enlisting the assistance of neighboring municipalities to shoulder more of the burden. Burlington needs some relief so we can start to reduce our general fund expenditures in this area. And I'll end by saying I look forward to our continued work together on these shared challenges and priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Are there any other councilors that wish to be recognized? Councilor Kane.
Thank you. I appreciate the mayor working on tax fairness and prioritizing strategic investments, while I believed making a good faith effort to mitigate cuts. I generally support the budget, but I'm sure no councilor feels good about every row. One item from the budget that I feel the strongest need to flag for the public is the $45,000 transfer for free parking. We already subsidize parking for city employees. We subsidize garage parking, on-street parking, permit parking in neighborhoods. In one of the garages, we actually rent a floor of parking spaces and then re-rent them to the public at a much lower rate, meaning that, up until now, the taxpayer has been paying more than the person parking their car for many spaces within the city. We don't reimburse bus fare for people who take the bus to Church Street. Subsidizing parking incentivizes one mode of transportation, the one that's worse for the environment, which puts added pressure on our strained GMT bus system and impedes land use reform that has motivated many cities to take a critical look at the value of surface parking. So I'll just note that I wish we had found a more constructive way to spend that $45,000, for instance, by using that money to expand our program that subsidizes business loans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kane. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized on item 3.1? I see Councilor Newbies are here, but Councilor Newbies I think we'll see if there's anyone who wants to be recognized for the first time, and then happy to come back to you if that's okay by you. I know that are you good with time? Okay. Councilor Grant, I saw your hand up, and then we'll turn to other councilors to see if other folks want to be recognized in the first round. Go ahead, Councilor Grant.
Thank you. I too extend my thanks on the hard work to put together this budget. I hear the concerns that are being made about gross receipts tax, which I do refer to as a consumption tax, which I will reiterate my standing that it's better to keep that tax rather than looking at raising property taxes. I guess my wish for the upcoming year is that we all need to listen to each other and work better together as a team. I sometimes don't feel that we're working as a team, and sometimes things get a little too partisan. I appreciate the mayor having to reiterate a number of times the goals of modern gov, the goals of looking at departments top to bottom in a way that they haven't been looked at, to see how we can make city government work better for employees, work better for the residents of the city. It has been brought to our attention many times that this was not going to be an easy process. It's been brought to our attention many times that there were not certain processes in place, such as having to look at a reduction in force. That was the first time the city had ever done this, and the city didn't have any procedures in place, which kind of surprised me, because municipalities should certainly keep up with best practices with regards to making certain personnel changes. I was surprised there weren't more reduction in forces from what happened last year going into this year, knowing that we have a structural gap, budget gap, that will be continuing, and that this is going to be an ongoing issue that the city will be dealing with, and will be continuing to take more steps with Martin Gov. So it is proper for us to expect more changes to come. But I appreciate what people have gone through who were affected by the reduction in force. In my lifetime, that has actually happened to me multiple times. I know that feeling very well. I will say that some of these changes, I look forward to the discussions when we talk about, for example, the Department of Administration and Finance, where we're really taking all these people that have been siloed in different departments and making sure that everyone who's been doing accounting and finance issues is in one place, following set procedures, following consistent processes. This is going to help us. This is going to help us. So I look forward to more consolidation where it makes sense. And I, once again, appreciate the mayor and what she has done to get to this place. And I look forward to the work that we, once again, all need to do together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Is there any councillor that has not been recognized a first time that wishes to be recognized? Okay, we'll go to Councillor Litwin and then Councillor Broderick.
Thanks very much. Most people have had a chance to talk, so I won't reiterate all the points that have been made, but I agree with much of what has been said by both my progressive and Democratic colleagues. There are some places where I have some disagreement, although I agree with Councillor Kane when he says probably line by line there are some things that each of us would like to change. So I did not feel that, contrary to what Councillor Bergman said, I did not feel as integrated into this process as he did. And I would encourage members of the public to watch today's Board of Finance meeting and listen to President Travers's comments, because I found them to be quite accurate to how I felt and reflective of some of the issues with the budget. Some of the problems that I particularly am concerned about is that we are kicking the can a little bit for FY27, and kind of depending on wins that happened at the state level with the education fund to sort of make the increase on the taxes only $115. They would have been quite a bit higher without that win. And so it allowed us to not cut as deeply as maybe we should have. Folks may disagree with me. And additionally, when we talk about budget increases, we're not talking about sort of all the other peripheral increases, some of which I won't get into tonight, but some that come to mind right away are that next week people will receive their first bill for the BHS bond payment. That will not be cheap. That will go up every year, and we will be paying that until 2046. Additionally, we just went out and asked the public to make significant investments in our infrastructure to the tune of $400-ish million, and eventually those will hit us. Water is going up, electricity is going up. So we need to look at this holistically. There are some other things that I flag. While I appreciate, that there are strategic reasons for certain things, the mayor's office budget has gone up by 58% from last year, 531,000 to 838, and has moved people into that office. I think should be in CEDO. And I agree with Councilor Barlow in his assessment that we really need, we probably need help from economic sort of experts, perhaps from UVM or Champlain College, to assess what we're actually spending broadly on public health expenses, particularly as it relates to substance use disorder crisis and homelessness in this city. We need a full city picture of what all those expenses are. $8 million is sort of a ballpark number. It could be much higher. And then additionally, I just want to notate that the Howard Center, as much as we are committed to funding them, we are growing our funding for them by 221%, moving from $77,000 to almost $250,000. And that being said, at the same time, Turning Point, which was previously funded under Mayor Weinberger from $4,500 to $17,500, because they went from serving around 300 or so Burlingtonians in peer-to-peer drug and alcohol recovery programs to over 800. That was defunded in the last fiscal year, and it was again, as part of this negotiation process, to even refund it back to 10,000, which does not even fully fund the peer-to-peer counseling program. And I want us to be committing, if we're committing to public health, I want us to be committing to pathways for recovery, and to make sure that we are giving folks an out to substance use disorder wherever we can. So I'll leave that there with my 5 seconds remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Councilor Broderick?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the mayor's office and her team for getting us a budget despite, as always, but especially in these past 2 years, the challenges. I am supporting this budget, though, as many of my colleagues have said, there are some things that I take issue with, but given the realities that we are living in terms of on a federal, state, and local level, how we generate revenue are currently not possible, but I am hopeful for the future on all those levels. Particularly, though I do appreciate the investments that the mayor's office has planned to make in addressing our housing crisis. Given that on a federal and state level, though there is, and specifically on a state level, there have been initiatives put forward. I believe they are grossly underfunded. And so while I do agree with Councilor Barlow that we need to be encouraging in terms of the public health response that our fellow municipalities and the state chip into their share in what is a state and national problem and crisis. That also applies to our other crises like housing. So I would also call on the state to put even more investment into housing. But until that happens, like many things, until that happens, I'm hoping that over the next fiscal year, we explore how through CEDO 2.0 and through our Housing Trust Fund, how we can make sure more dollars are going to creating more housing and ensuring that that housing is permanently affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Is there any councilor that has not been recognized yet that wishes to be recognized on item 3.1? All right, then Councilor Newbeezer would be happy to turn to you now, although I'll note that you had used your 5 minutes before, so if you could keep it brief, Councilor Newbeezer, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, not a second round. I'd like to make an amendment to strike the $100,000 allocated to the Visiting Nurses Association in the budget.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? I'll ask once more, is there a second to that motion?
I'm going to second it, just so we can.
Okay. Councilor Bergman has seconded the motion. I will note that due to a professional conflict of interest, I must recuse myself from this motion, and so I'm going to pass the gavel to Councilor McKnight to act as council president.
Thank you, Councilor Travers. Councilor Newbeeser, would you like the floor to explain your amendment?
I would, thank you, Council President. At the risk of upsetting the apple cart, as my colleague said, there is one issue that remains in this budget, which I do feel that I need to raise for the public and for my colleagues. In the past number of years, we've supported work that falls under the UVM Health Network's umbrella through our regional programs budget. And this year, we are again proposing, it's a decrease, but allocating $100,000 to support that work. For reference, for the public and my colleagues, this is the $100,000 allocation for the UVM Health Network's HHS work, HHH work, I should say. It's on page 23 of the attached total general fund budget under 3.1. I want to be clear that this is important work being done and is important to many of our residents. At one time, the city supporting this work directly with funds from our regional programming budget made sense. But since they have come under the umbrella of the UVM Health Network, I also want to acknowledge that many of the workers actually who just won a union recently, will be fighting for their first contract. Those workers doing this work are underpaid and need much better working conditions and wages. I also know, though, that the UVM Health Network has the funds to cover the cost of this work without asking 22 local municipalities, including our own, to fund it. The UVM Health Network is an organization that has made over $2.2 billion in profit, since 2018. While they've communicated that this work is housed under a private nonprofit under the umbrella, which is true of many services under their umbrella, it is a network of various entities, and that they don't provide any funding for this work directly, they very well could. The UVM Health Network has moved to the tunes of millions money between entities within their network before. It is true, as the health network communicated, that they likely lose money doing this work because it isn't profitable. And it is also true that there is a similar dynamic in other areas of our healthcare system within the UVM Health Network. Some services are higher margin, and some work and services are lower margin or produce a loss, and the health network covers those losses. I'll wrap my comments here by saying the UVM Health Network and the Medical Center, I want to remind my colleagues and the public, have increased their liquid assets by $1 billion, meaning money on hand, between 2018 and 2024. $1 billion, from around 850 million roughly to 1.9 billion roughly. So they have funds, they have money to cover these costs. They are able to move money and have, let's say for creative accounting purposes, between entities within their network. But we are being told that they cannot cover, or they would pose to us as a body that they can't cover a $100,000 expense, and are going around to not only us, but I imagine we're probably paying the most, although I don't know. 22 other municipalities strapped for cash, already taking on, as my colleagues have said, a large share of the burden addressing homelessness and other statewide issues that the state has, again, in this legislative session, failed to adequately address. It is also a fact that UVM Health Network executives in 2024 made $3 million in bonuses alone. I would venture a guess to say that those $3 million constitute a greater sum of money than the total amount these 22 municipalities are sending. So while I do not want to upset the apple cart, and while I do not want to delay going and hanging out with my family and use up our time here and the time of my colleagues, I cannot vote for a budget without naming what I see as continued greed, clear as day, from the UVM Health Network. And I also think that even if this amendment fails, we need to have this conversation, and I'm glad that we'll have a broader conversation about the criteria around our regional programs budget. But we cannot continue to subsidize this kind of greed. The state, we need state action that has been much more aggressive. They took some steps this legislative session. We need much more aggressive regulatory action from the state, from Green Mountain Care Board, to rein these folks in, because we've experienced in this budget and every other budget, we're seeing, again, double-digit increases to our healthcare costs. And in large part, it's the drug companies and it's the hospitals. And the UVM Health Network owns 60+% of the market. So we need to, at some point, say enough is enough. And we can do that in this small way here at the local level. Thank you.
Wish to be recognized on this amendment? Councillor Lewin?
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief. While I do really appreciate Councillor Newbeeser bringing this up, this is a large line item, and this is a complex question that I think is deserving of more conversation than we are obviously able to give it at 11:59 p.m., figuratively speaking, in building the budget. I would have liked to learn more, have the opportunity to learn more about this topic, have the opportunity to speak with Councillor Newbeeser even about some of the data that he has clearly researched, and spoken to the UVM Health Network. So I won't be able to support this amendment just simply because I don't have the information to make what I think would be a thoughtful vote. So thank you, Councillor Newbeeser, but I won't be able to support your motion.
Thank you, Councillor Litwin. Others? Okay. Oh, Councillor Broderick?
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Councillor Newbeeser for bringing this to our attention and bringing it into the public eye. I completely agree with your sentiment, and where your motion states that this money would be better off in if UVM Health Network would foot the bill. I have no idea if they would, and I think to Councillor Litwin's points, because we haven't had these conversations, and not only do I not have guarantees that this service or a similar service will still be provided, knowing the greed of our health companies, I wouldn't be surprised if the service just ended up being cut. So I would want assurances like that, or also potentially other municipalities footing an even larger bill, again, because of that greed that your sentiment speaks to, that I completely agree with. So I cannot support this today, but as Councillor Litwin said, I think it's a conversation that we need to continue to have with UVM Health Network and the other municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broderick. Is there any other councillor who would like to be recognized on this amendment? All right, seeing none, we will go to a vote, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councillor Barlow?
No.
Councillor Bergman?
No.
Councillor Broderick?
No.
Councillor Carpenter?
No.
Councillor Grant?
No.
Councillor Kane?
No.
Councillor Litwin?
No.
Acting City Council President McKnight?
No.
Councillor Newbeeser?
Yes.
Councillor Schachter?
No.
Councillor Singh?
No.
One aye, 10 nays, and one recusal.
Okay, thank you.
So that amendment fails, and we will return to the underlying resolution item number 3.1. Welcome back.
All right, we are back on the underlying motion made by Councilor Bergman, seconded by Councilor McKnight. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized on item 3.1? Yes, Councilor Litwin. I will note that you had 5 seconds left as well. Not much time left.
Well, lucky for you, I'm going to do the same thing that Councilor Newbeeser did, which is I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
So the motion I would like to make, and I would appreciate the floor back to explain myself if somebody chooses to second it, would be to adjust the FY26 budget and remove $7,500 from the Howard Center Street Outreach total fund of $249,000 and apply that $7,500 to Turning Point's $10,000 so that we can fully fund their drug and alcohol peer recovery program for FY26.
Okay. Councilor Litwin has brought forward a two-part motion, one to decrease the line item for Howard Center Street Outreach by $7,500, and the second part of it to increase the line item for the Turning Point Center and the regional programs by $7,500. Is that correct, Councilor Litwin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As this two-part motion requires an increase to a certain line item under our charter, the motion would require a 2/3 majority. But first, I will ask the council whether or not there is a second to that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Singh. Councilor Litwin, we'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you, and I likely won't take the full 5 minutes because I did address this a bit in my earlier comments. Ultimately, I think what happened with Turning Point, which is still being looked at, is that really there was just sort of a little bit of a mix-up in communication and understanding about what happened with this fiscal year's budget. And so folks have been providing the peer recovery services all year, thinking that they were going to be able to submit invoices, and there has been staff turnover and other things have happened, plus we have a whole new government, so a lot happens. And so they're having to fill that gap for this year as well. Additionally, if you look at their kind of their impact, I looked at their their 2024 impact report, and I was really stunned at how many Burlingtonians that they are serving, and that number is growing substantially. That's a good thing. We want people to know that Turning Point is there and that those doors are open for them to start their journey to recovery. There are so many folks who have such a history, and to have the supportive staff of Turning Point and the peers who have lived through the experience of substance use disorder and the various traumas that come along with that is so valuable for our community and our path forward that I believe all of us share a desire to see, which is a safer, healthier Burlington. They have grown by 2.5 times just in the past couple years how many people they're serving through this program, over 800 Burlington residents specifically. And I'd love to see that number grow and grow. Under Mayor Weinberger, that number was only $4,500, and they made a compelling case to Mayor Weinberger to increase that to, I believe, $17,500. They're serving those Burlingtonians, and this was from a memo a couple of years ago, for around $12 a person. This is an incredibly effective and cost-effective program. And I would just like to see us, again, really investing in avenues of recovery, especially as we are investing heavily in avenues of harm reduction, particularly with the upcoming Overdose Prevention Center and other initiatives that we are engaging in. This is a I don't want to say a paltry sum, but this is $7,500 does not even buy you a flashing beacon at a crosswalk, but can make a big difference in the lives of people who are struggling with substance use disorder and are seeking to make a better life for themselves and their children and their families. So I ask you to please support this motion. It is not a negative attack on anyone. This is a complex budget with a lot going on, and some of this was only brought to light in recent weeks. So I urge you to support moving this. We're still funding the Howard Center Street Outreach Team. Again, I said about 221% more than what we funded them last year. This will move the margin on that percentage by next to nothing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Councilor Litwin. Councilor McKnight?
Thank you for bringing this up, Councilor Litwin. I agree with you. This is a small move that seems like maybe I realize how frustrating it is to get these requests at this late hour, but I'm curious if we could make it work. You know, for myself, having stood by several family members as they struggled with addiction and did get the support that they need, you know, I've just seen up close and personal how important this is, and in a budget of over $100 million, it seems like we should be able to find $7 grand. So I'd like to direct a question to the mayor through Council President Travers, if that's acceptable. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this, Mayor, and if you're open to this change, or if there's another avenue that you're already thinking about that we might not know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McKnight. Mayor, would you be willing to respond to Councilor McKnight's question?
Yes, so I just want to start by saying community health is throughout this budget and is a major priority. And just to clarify the record a little bit, the Howard Center Street Outreach Program has been level funded for 15 plus years since I was on City Council. That's the same amount of money for substantial staff increases. It started with one person on that team, and it has now grown to something like half a dozen because of the acute need in our downtown center core. Howard Center also is facing budget cuts, much like a lot of our folks, our critical community partners are. They are a designated agency. They have critical services that particular team is able to network people into in terms of mental health supports, and it is long overdue. This is a critical investment, and they are scheduled to have a significant reduction by the state. So this was the year necessary to really invest these dollars into the street outreach team. I want to also remind councilors that in the fiscal year 25 budget, you all supported this budget that included zeroing out several regional program budgets, including Turning Point. So you all voted on this last year. These are not easy decisions, but our regional program budget, per the language in this resolution, which was important to me in the back and forth around refunding some pieces, it's never about defunding. It's around how do we fairly and equitably redistribute resources for a process that is not open to other nonprofits and other partners in the community. It just isn't. It's been advocated by people who know how to speak to a councilor or a mayor, and that is not a fair process. It's not about the individual organizations, it's about the process itself not being one based on equity, fairness, and accessibility for folks, and also a year where we had to reduce our own city workforce by 25 positions. So I take that all very seriously. It's a much wider story that we need to be considering when line item amendments like this come forward. The other thing I just want to say on this is that Turning Point money was reinstated, and we are, because of a miscommunication. It was the first year as mayor. I was in this role for a matter of weeks when that decision was placed out. If there was a miscommunication, we are taking ownership of that in my office and finding resources for last year. So it is not as if Turning Point does not have the support. They are a critical partner, and they know that in our community health response. But at this late hour, I don't think this is also a very fair process to do for all the other folks that have also been reduced in the regional budget program that didn't have someone championing their cause. So I would caution against supporting this amendment, as well-intentioned as it is, and know that we have a very robust community health strategy that we're rolling out, and know that we are still funding Turning Point to some extent in the proposed budget that is in the underlying motion on the floor, not this amendment, but the underlying motion on the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor McKnight, do you want the floor back?
No, thank you. That was a very thorough response. I appreciate it.
Okay. Councilor Barlow.
Thank you, and I appreciate the amendment, but I will not be supporting it again for reasons that the previous amendment were not supported. It's being introduced sort of at the last minute. We have an agreement on the overall budget, and although this is certainly a worthy expenditure of money, I feel like we can introduce it at this late hour. I will, however, commit that for $7,500, it seems like we can make something work outside of the adoption of the budget tonight. So I would commit to trying to explore things like that in the future.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Is there any other? Yeah, Councilor Singh.
I would like to echo Councilor Barlow's feelings on this, but I would also like to say, I do wholly support street outreach, but at the same time, I firmly believe 12-step programs, places like Turning Point, are vital given the crisis that's out there in our city. They do provide a valuable service. I've supported Turning Point in the past, and I really believe it's not just helping people get through recovery or start recovery. I worry about people who struggle in their recovery, and these peer-to-peer programs I know are vital for many people that I know that have been through recovery. Talk about how important these peer-to-peer meetings are and how the support of that individual keeps them on track to hold their lives, their families, and their livelihoods together. So I really hope that we can consider this as part of our portfolio to the response to the drug crisis, because I think it is an important piece and one that is not often talked about. But I appreciate that, but I will not support the amendment.
Thank you, Councilor Singh. Councilor Grant.
Thank you. I share the deep appreciation for the work that Turning Point does, but I cannot support moving any money from the street outreach team. In fact, we need much more. The street outreach team has stepped up in a way that previously couldn't have been imagined when we didn't have a police response downtown. And even though we have changes occurring now, which are very welcome, they're still needed. Ideally, we would have them for longer periods of time during the day. They will continue to be a necessary tool in our overall community safety response. And I know a lot of our downtown businesses have at times called them first before calling the police department based on the situations of dealing with individuals with various issues around mental health and substance use and de-escalating situations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Grant. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized, or can we go to a vote? All right, seeing none, we'll go to a vote, and I'll ask that the clerk please call the roll.
Councilor Barlow?
No.
Councilor Bergman?
No.
Councilor Broderick?
No.
Councilor Carpenter?
No.
Councilor Grant?
No.
Councilor Kane?
No.
Councilor Litwin?
Yes.
Councilor McKnight?
No.
Councilor Newbeezer?
I do not see Councilor Newbeezer online any longer.
Councilor Schachter?
No.
Councilor Singh?
No.
City Council President Travers?
No.
1 aye, 10 nays, and 1 absent.
With 1 yes and 2 noes, and the vote requiring a 2/3 majority, the amendment fails. We are now back on the underlying resolution. Is there any other councilor that wishes to be recognized on this item? All right, seeing none, we will go to a vote. The item is item 3.1, again moved by Councilor Bergman, seconded by Councilor McKnight, on the annual appropriation and budget for fiscal year 2026. All in favor on the question, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. We're now on item 3.2. We now have a budget, Mayor. We had an agenda at first, so. But now we need to fund the budget. So we're at item 3.2, resolution annual tax assessments on the property grand list of the city for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026. And Mayor and CIO Shad, I know that a good amount of this was presented earlier, but at this time, do you have anything else to add specific to item 3.2? Okay. The recommended action for 3.2 is to waive the reading and adopt the resolution. Councilor Bergman, are you good for this one as well?
I am good to move to waive the reading and adopt this resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. Oops, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
We'll go with Councilor Barlow this time. Does any councilor wish to be recognized on item 3.2? All right, seeing none, we will go to a vote on this item. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries unanimously, and we now have a funded budget. That is the last item on our deliberative agenda. As this is a special meeting, there are no other items on our agenda, so seeing no other business before the council and absent objection, I will adjourn the city council at 8:01 p.m. Thank you very much.